My name's Tanya Browning. I'm part of the Magento team, leading product design. I welcome you to our responsive design panel. We're really excited to have some folks here today who are going to talk about some very specific case studies, some examples, and they're going to give results-oriented information. So I think that this is going to be really meaningful from a business perspective. I've been with Magento a little over a year. I came from the PayPal family, done my share of startups in bigger companies. I'm really excited to be working on the next generation of Magento products. I think we have a lot to look forward to as a company, and I hope that you guys get a taste of what's to come. Now, please hold your questions till the end, and we'll have a Q&A. And we know we're all that stands between you and lunch, so we're going to try to keep this thing on time for you, okay? Erin.
So I'm Erin Tozer. I'm Senior Manager for Visual Design. I've been with Magento for 2.5 years, and I'm so excited this year to be at Imagine because it's so much more exciting and more beautiful than it's been in the past couple of years. It's just gone up a notch, a bunch of notches. And you know, I worked on the first 2 Imagine conferences, and I've been working on websites, marketing websites for Magento, and events. But recently, I'm really excited to now be on Tanya's team, heading up visual design for the product. So we're excited to kind of bring the level of visual design and user experience up, in the next iterations. So everyone's talking about responsive design. It's the hot topic, I think. I was talking to George, there he is, earlier today because he's documenting the process of how we created Imagine and how we've created the designs, and he's going around interviewing people, putting together a documentary, and he was asking me what the hot topic is this year. And I was saying, I really think it's responsive design. And he was like, that's interesting. And just before we came in here, he came over to me and he said, Erin, you're right. It's responsive design. Everybody I've talked to has been, mentioning that. So it's something that we're really excited about. So we're excited to have a great panel of experts here today to talk about it. They're going to give us some examples of some of the projects that they've implemented responsive design on. So we're really excited to have them here.
Oh, and I did want to mention, too, this is a topic where businesses can be pretty divided. A lot of it has to do with your scope and scalability. When you have an app versus when you design for responsive kind of approach. And, eBay Inc. itself is divided. We've got responsive design in part of the company, app-specific in other parts of the company. So this is absolutely relevant to what we're doing, and we hope what you're doing.
Yeah. So we've got Bob Meyer here. He's Managing Director at the Guerrilla Group. And then Sarah Ward, who is the Director of Digital Marketing and E-commerce at Peter Malhar. And she's here as a client of the Guerrilla Group. And then we have David Barr, who's the Executive Vice President from Lyons Consulting Group. And then we have Brennan Falkowski, who's the founder at Gravity Department. So take it away, Bob.
Welcome.
Well, thank you for the introduction. Give you a little bit of background. Bob Meyer, I'm Managing Director of the Guerrilla Group. Been in the e-commerce space for about 13 years now. I've worked with clients such as Eddie Bauer, Express Fashions, Peter Malhar, Lilly Pulitzer, taking sites from $0 to $500 million online. As far as the Guerrilla Group is concerned, we've been a Magento Gold partner since 2008. We've won both Partner of the Year and Partner of Excellence. We consider ourselves a full-service agency, if you will, or a solution provider. We not only have the implementation and development capabilities, but we also bring design, strategy, managed services, hosting, as well as developed a few of our own extensions. We feel we bring true responsive design to the Magento Enterprise platform. We not only have an Adapt showcase, which is how we kind of got our start with responsive design. You're free to go out to our site and take a look at it. We work with awesome clients such as Peter Malhar to actually put that practice into action. And we've also implemented responsive design on our own website. So we feel that we're the leading edge as far as delivery of responsive design. Case study we're going to talk a little bit about today is Peter Malhar. For those of you not familiar with the brand, Peter Malhar is a multi-channel retailer that designs, manufactures, and distributes quality men's and women's apparel. Their brand focus is an enduring commitment to craftsmanship and a timeless style. They were actually acquired by the holding company Richemont in 2012. And for those of you not familiar with their parent company, Cartier, Montblanc, Net-a-Porter, or Net-a-Porter as we say in the Midwest, are also some of their brands. Before we get started, I did want to give you a little bit of background on mobile commerce in general. If any of you sat through the keynote today, you did see some data on this. Just to give a little more detail and a little more context, excluding travel and tickets, mobile commerce is expected to represent $38 billion online this year. And by 2016 is supposed to represent almost a quarter of all online revenue. So think about that. 1 in every $4 on your site today will come from mobile commerce. Mobile devices will actually outnumber the world's population by the end of this year. There's no silver bullet in mobile commerce. The key is actually finding the right strategy for your customers and your brand. There's actually 3 approaches to mobile commerce that most of you should be familiar with. The first one is mobile optimized, or what we refer to as an MDOT site. The second one is a smartphone app, and obviously the third one is responsive design, which is what we're here to talk about today. So mobile sites and apps absolutely make sense in the right context. If you've got a large brand that has a number of retail outlets and is trying to drive people to the store, a mobile optimized website with a great store locator where you can send offers and opportunities for customers to save by walking in the store, it's absolutely a great strategy. Same with an app. If you can build an app for a particular brand to take advantage of some of the native functionality on a device, such as the camera, shake to select an outfit, if you will, again, the right brand using the right strategy, an app makes perfect sense. We also find that there are some drawbacks to either one of those approaches. First, apps and MDOT sites require separate design and development costs. Essentially what you're doing is running 2 separate tracks or code bases, if you will. Ongoing maintenance support can also get costly because you now are starting to maintain separate sets of content in addition to the separate code bases. Have any of you ever viewed an MDOT site on a tablet? It just doesn't take advantage of the capabilities of that device. Again, making sure that the experience is appropriate for the device at hand. If not executed properly, it could have severe SEO implications as well. We're actually starting to see MDOT sites outrank what we would traditionally call a desktop site in search results. So essentially you're cannibalizing your own business. The other one that somebody mentioned to me the other day, social sharing is also starting to have an impact. So if you share a link from an MDOT site and somebody's viewing it on a desktop, they're going to have an MDOT site experience on their desktop. And you as a merchant or retailer are not going to convey your brand on the appropriate device and channel that you would expect. Smartphone apps, again, make a lot of sense in some cases. Between the Google App Store and the iTunes App Store, there are about 600,000 different apps that you can download. Google's growing at a pace of something like 200%. So the space is very fragmented in terms of what you can do. Some interesting stats we've been tracking is retail apps are actually used only once per week by the average user. And 1/3 of all retail apps are still in use after 90 days. So you've now invested all of this time, all of this money to get a separate app going. You now are managing all that content separately, and you've already lost 2/3 of your audience. The last thing is highly branded apps are used, who have 1 million downloads or more represent less than 1% of the app market. So again, even big retailers aren't getting the penetration from an app that they'd hoped for. Responsive design. So what we're learning about responsive design is it offers a new approach, a modular approach to building a site. Responsive is not just resizing a site for a particular device. If you want to think of it as it's essentially reusing and or hiding content and functionality for device-specific experiences. So think of it as a master set of content, and features and functions, and you can turn those features and functions and content on or off depending on the device. It's a single set of content to manage, which is more cost effective for you. It also has, what is it called? Intentional experiences across devices. What does that mean? So when you're working on a desktop and you have a hover state, there's no such thing on a tablet. You can display that on the desktop and yet have a similar yet uniquely tailored experience for that tablet or mobile device, all within the same framework. SEO and social sharing benefits. I think the Google webmasters were the ones that said the best way to have a mobile experience is to use responsive design. You're taking advantage of all of the SEO that you've built onto your site already, not to mention all of the links that you can share. And again, if you share a link from a tablet to a phone or a phone to a desktop, the experience, regardless of where the link was sent from, will be tailored to the end state device that's being used. Some people say you're also future-proofing your site. You know, responsive is not without its drawbacks. One of the biggest complaints or concerns we hear has to do with the performance of a responsive website. Folks say it takes a little bit longer to download it initially. And while that may be true in some cases, if you think about those things in advance as you're building it, you architect it correctly, even challenges within checkout can be overcome easily. Peter Malhar is a great example of that. So what was Peter Malhar all about? Essentially what they wanted to do was they wanted to come up with an upgraded design and user experience that fit in line with their brand. They did have some unique challenges, one of which was their demographic, highly affluent. Another key component was they're very tightly aligned with the PGA. So one of the key things they saw is as some of their affiliate golfers were doing better in tournaments, traffic in general, but specifically to mobile devices, increased. Brad Snedeker won the 2012 FedEx Cup and traffic went up. So we needed to account for those types of things. So single solution, we needed to find a single solution that was not only attractive, but could scale and continue them on in the future. A couple of other things, like most of all of you, Peter Malhar has, somewhat limited personnel, budgets, just like we all do. And essentially what we did was we came up with a Magento and responsive design combination that proved ideal for the client needs. Here are some of the results that we saw from the responsive design implementation. Most importantly, mobile visits are up 110%. Another unique factor is total site visits are up 70% as a result of this redesign as well. Average order value across the board, not just on mobile devices or tablets, is up 20%. We also saw a 33% increase in conversion rate from organic search. So again, all of the things, having the right strategy, the right solution, implementing it properly, is driving not only increases in orders, order value, conversions on the tablet and mobile channel, but it's also driving similar or better than expected results on the desktop channel as well. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dave Barr now from Lyons Consulting Group.
All right, thanks, Bob. Let me just get the screen in front of me caught up with the screen behind me, and we'll get started. Okay, thanks. I'm Dave Barr, EVP and co-founder of Lyons Consulting Group, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to talk with all of you today, so thanks for having me. A little bit about our firm. So Lyons Consulting Group, or Lyons CG, is an e-commerce digital agency. We have over 160 professionals around the world in our various offices who are really helping customers with a broad range of services around e-commerce. Specifically, we have a retail strategy practice helping customers really do analysis and figure out marketing plans and how to go to market, which plays a huge role as we talk about responsive design and some of the nuance that we need to consider. The retail strategy team informs the UX and creative design team, which then builds the overall experience, the wireframes, and ultimately the design that leads to the development phase and the implementation teams. So we have dedicated implementation teams then that launch the sites and build the sites, do the custom integrations, build integrations to back-end systems, and build out those overall experiences. And then once we launch the sites, we have full 24/7 monitoring and support within our hosting operation. So we have a team of folks who are dedicated exclusively to supporting live customers on the Magento platform. They are dedicated exclusively to support and not focused on implementation. So they really understand some of the nuance that it takes to be successful online and the real-time engagement that needs to happen with our customers. We've won the Magento Innovator of the Year Award, we've won the Partner Excellence Award, and currently are responsible for some of Magento's most complex and sophisticated implementations. And ultimately, we think we do this through our core value system. We're customer-centric in all we do. We work very hard to put ourselves in our customers' shoes, build long-term relationships, and continually think of things through our customers' lens. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of statistics here from Google, some data. So 50% of users use their smartphone to look up bars and restaurants. Who here is doing that as well? I'm guilty for sure. 31% to research or book travel. 76% to watch video on their device. 80% to visit social networks. 46% use their phones to research future purchases. So it's obvious that mobile's here to stay. At the conferences over the last couple years, the mobile conference for Internet Retailer, the Magento conference, we've talked a lot about mobile, and it's now here in a big way. So we're going to talk about the case for responsive design, and a lot of these comments really confirm a lot of things Bob was talking about and that you all know with your own businesses. So mobile is absolutely critical. The stats that we just reviewed confirm that. And over the last couple years, mobile's been critical as a secondary site. So prior to last year, it was really about having an MDOT site. And today, it was interesting, just a few weeks ago, I was with a customer, Warner Music Group. We run about 100 or so individual music artist sites for Warner Music Group. And we rolled out MDOT sites for them a couple years ago, and that was a big win for them. They started to see traffic and gains. As we're talking about new sites, it dawned on me that responsive is the new standard when the client said, well, isn't that just what you do now? You just do responsive. That's the way you go. So it was where responsive has clearly come of age, and you start to see it. It's reflected in our customer base and the work that we're doing day in and day out. Apps can provide some really deep features, and there are a lot of reasons, especially when you've got a brand that you're continually engaging your customers with. eBay is an awesome example of the type of business that should have an app. Some of the very large retailers like the Nordstroms of the world, it might make a lot of sense for those folks. But for most of the folks that we engage with, they're looking to acquire new customers as much as they're looking to sell to their existing customer base. So for those looking to acquire, often responsive design, it may be a customer's first visit to your site. You want them to have a rich, engaged experience on any device. Those really make the case, those situations make the case for responsive design. And there's not a commitment. So in the responsive design world, those first-time shoppers get that optimized experience versus having to commit to a download. How many times have we downloaded the apps, go a week or two without using them, or perhaps 6 months, and then you don't even know what that app was for, right? So you're cluttering up your iPhone, and I think those are all very personal devices that we, over time, prefer really to have the experience our way when we're ready, but not to have too many apps. Responsive does allow for a very iterative approach. So a year ago, it was all about a web-enabled experience, a tablet-enabled experience with the iPad coming out a few years ago, and then, of course, the smartphone-enabled experience. And then came the phablet, right? And when the phablet came along, it's really that hybrid approach between the tablet and the phone. And the iPad mini, where does that sit? And really, coming up with additional iterations for these different devices becomes easier as you move forward with responsive design. They become limited development and creative efforts versus entirely new experiences. It does provide, responsive provides the upside for these flexible experiences, but the SEO benefit is huge, right? So by having to compete with yourselves as merchants, by having both a mobile site and a website, you're competing for your own SEO rankings with yourself. With a responsive design approach, you're ultimately driving one experience, running against one code base and optimizing the site with one set of content. It is a little more expensive often to build upfront, but likely less costly in the long run. And I know that Brendan has some data and statistics that kind of prove this out. We're looking forward to hearing that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our process. At Lyons, we're very careful to build process around all of our delivery to be effective and have predictable outcomes for us and for our customers. And so we start with analysis. So our retail strategy team really digs into customer demographics to understand the buying behaviors. And it starts with a very simple analysis when you're looking at your Google Analytics to see what devices people are shopping your site on. Are they coming on an iPhone, a tablet, on a PC? But that's the surface layer. So we see an increasing number that are coming from mobile devices and, of course, tablets. But we really need to understand the next layer down. What are they coming to shop for? What are they coming to shop? Are they coming to locate? Are they coming to search? Are they coming to research? So by device, we want to drill into specifically what the consumers are doing on the individual sites and what features and functions need to reside and where those percentages lie. We then take that and we inform the UX team of our analysis and get into defining the overall breakpoints for the various target sizes. So we understand at that point what features need to be on a mobile device. For instance, locator might be prominent versus a tablet needs to be more about a browse and shopping experience. So really defining those breakpoints, coming up with content diagrams in either low or high fidelity depending on our audience, and then getting into the UX production, creating the detailed wireframes, typically starting with the smallest first and working our way up. Sometimes we'll start with the largest and work our way down, but it's often easier to add than to take away. And these are examples of what it looks like. So this is a low fidelity content diagram. Looks like a wireframe, essentially trying to define by device type what's going to reside on the site and how it's going to look. When we're working internally, when we're doing all of the IA work as well as the creative work, we're often passing these off internally from our IA team to our creative team. If we're working with a client's branding team, where they're doing all the work, we need more detail. They may not understand our vernacular or our language, so we have high fidelity content diagrams and wireframes that really define all of the details. So often with the larger brands out there, they take a lot of care and time into the creative, and so we're often working in a hybrid model. The case study that I'm going to talk about today is a site called Vanity. Vanity is a fast fashion brand with about 200 stores in 27 states. We launched them initially on Magento a couple of years ago, and then came back after we started to see a lot of change in their demographics and their customers and their user behavior. We came back and our retail strategy team did an analysis of the existing static site, of the existing website. We found that the mobile visits were on a hockey stick curve growing up and to the right. Mobile conversions, however, were lacking. So lots and lots of people were showing up on the site with iPhones and with tablets, but they couldn't check out for various reasons, or they were struggling to check out. So this younger demographic was increasingly trying to purchase, but without success. So we redesigned the entire site, the overall experience, on both on three form factors. So on web, on tablet, and on a smartphone, of course. And the results were very impressive. So iPhone is their #1 source of traffic at 36%. So this was the snapshot after a couple months after launching this site. They saw a 226% increase in year-over-year mobile traffic, so a huge increase in the mobile traffic. A 68% increase in mobile conversions, so they started to capture dollars from all those browsers that couldn't check out prior. A 314% increase in year-over-year mobile revenue, which paid for the project very quickly. So when we talk about the development effort being higher or greater when you're doing responsive design and the creative efforts, you have more to think about and more time consumed. In this case, the results paid for the project very quickly. And an overall increase of 20% in overall site conversion across all form factors. So a huge win for Vanity that really helped grow their business. So what do we need to think about? We need to think about analysis. We need to analyze the data. We need to analyze the traffic, understand where people are coming from, what devices, and then specifically, what are they trying to do when they arrive on that device? And really make sure you go that extra layer, you understand what's happening there. You need to consider your vertical, your category. So electronics are shopped much different than you would shop apparel, right? So on apparel sites, there's a lot of browse, and you want to look at lots of things, and it's a long scroll activity, perhaps. On electronics, it's about specs and filtering and sorting. So you really want to think about those features and functions and design your site with all of that in mind. We talk about browse versus filter versus search versus locate. These are the primary activities that people are coming to your site to perform, and so we really need to design these experiences and move things around on the various devices so that we're playing to the percentages of the people who are looking for various things on your site. You need to understand your selling channels. So are you an online retailer only? It's a different experience than if you have a store and a catalog, perhaps. So brands with multiple stores require a different level of engagement on tablet versus mobile. The more mobile that we're doing with a lot of stores, the more it's about looking up the store nearest you, taking advantage of some of the features inherent in the phone to do location-based services. And we also know that tablet behavior is more shopping and often converts higher, actually, than a PC. So it really does build the case for responsive design. So what else do we need to think about? The creative and development effort for responsive design, it's just a fact. It's greater than a traditional site. There's more work that goes into it. You have more moving parts and more to consider. There are a lot of great templates that do exist out there. We're seeing, especially in the Magento space, we're seeing a huge influx of new Magento templates that leverage a responsive theme. They're evolving very quickly, but you should plan for additional development. Don't think that that template's going to work out of the box. They're often developed for community edition, perhaps, and don't take advantage of all the features resident in enterprise. Or the solution overall just might not meet your needs. It might not match up with the analysis that you perform. So we really need to plan for development, even if you are taking advantage of an existing template. Multi-site deployments, you need extra consideration for technical discipline. So as you're starting to deploy multi-site environments where you're running 2, 10, or 100 sites in Magento, you really have to plan for your technical architecture and make sure that you're doing it right up front, because the development effort is often going to be 2 to 4 times the amount. And if you get it wrong, it's exponentially more painful to kind of unwind that and come back to it. And it's often most effective, responsive design is most effective as part of an overall redesign. It's harder to bolt it onto an existing site and then try to factor for tablet and mobile. It is all about the analysis, and you really need to analyze the data, understand what specifically your consumers are shopping for, what they're looking for on the site when they arrive, and manage to your audience. So manage whether it's a browse environment, whether it's a filter, a search, or a locate. Plan for additional development, creative effort where required. We all, I think, understand the value, especially the SEO folks in the room, of a single code base. So there's a lot of benefits to a single code base for ease of manageability for the merchants, but also from an SEO perspective. And it will provide you with a seamless brand experience across all devices, but focused per device. So very interesting and will increase conversion. And again, most effective as part of an overall redesign. So that wraps up my portion. Thank you very much. And on to Brennan.
Okay, hi. I'm Brennan Falkowski. I founded a small web design and strategy studio called Gravity Department. We're based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And when I say we, I just mean me. I'm the only one at the company, which is challenging because usually I work with internal teams who need a really, really good person who's focused on front-end design and development, or other studios. And my work's split about 50% between client services for companies like Skinny Ties and Angry Birds, and then the other half is product work So I built a theme called Acumen, which is one of the best-selling front-end Magento themes. And I'm working on a product called Mage Frontend, which is a responsive design toolkit for Magento Enterprise. I'm also a member of Magento's advisory board for certifying developers, and I took the front-end cert the other day and passed it. So, so that's a good thing. But everything I do these days is multi-device in nature. And this is something that almost everyone who gets in touch with me wants to know. And there are basically two answers to this question. One of them is a number, and I'm guilty of this. And some clients just want a ballpark or they need to get a quote. But design's not really a service that you can buy off of a commodities list. It's something like good design is valuable, and it's a process. So we have this interest in gripping all these fragments of what we could do and synthesizing one outcome from all the possibilities that we could take. And the other answer, this is what I usually say now, is I don't know yet. We need to talk about this and explore the options first. It's not something that we can answer right away in a kickoff call, but we'll get to the cost question. It just takes time. So for pre-budgeting, I usually turn right around, and the clients hate this. I say, so what's your budget? And that's really unfair to them. But for 10 grand, we can't work together for 6 months to build the kind of outcome that you really need to be effective in this space. And neither of us really wants to be shooting in the dark. We want to get down to brass tacks as quick as possible. So a good consultant can help you develop a needs assessment for responsive design by asking the right questions. So some of those might be, are you catching up right now? Or are you consolidating what you have? Or are you future-proofing? What's your minimum acceptable outcome with this project? And what's your dream scenario? And then what happens if you succeed with this or if you fail? What if you do nothing? And can you really afford to do that? Will the business be able to survive if you don't act now? And if you can answer those questions, your budget situation will start to improve. Now, your company doesn't miraculously get richer overnight, but it does ground you in reality. And it sets a standard for what you need, and that gives you a lot of motivation to get there. But clients really hate being told, it depends, and ask for their budget. So I like to invite them to ask a different question. Oh, wait. Okay, I'm going to go like this from now on. What's responsive design's value? And this is a lot more interesting because it flips the proposition around. Creating value always beats creating cost. And we can talk about that immediately by comparing our possible outcomes. So if we plot the spectrum of devices that we're worrying about today, and we pick a frame of reference, like the fixed width site, we've been making these for years, but a responsive site might take maybe twice as many resources. And within this realm of fixed width sites, which is kind of here, you have all these intangibles that responsive serves that a fixed width site doesn't. So even though it's a little bit more expensive up front, it's still a pretty tenable strategy. Now, if you go one step further and you talk about a desktop site and a mobile app versus a responsive site, you see now we have nearly the same resources being used. But again, if you look at these intangibles, you have this middle range of those small to mid-sized tablets that aren't really being served by a mobile site and a desktop site, and this starts to become really economical as a strategy. And then if you go one step further to the crazy example where you have a desktop site and a mobile site and 2 different mobile apps for iOS and Android and then an iPad app, you're either Facebook right now or you have a huge amount of problems. So in this case, the devices we're serving has nearly evened out, but you're in this really, really high value territory now. And for a small company or startup, this illustrates why responsive design is a really viable strategy. And for a large established retailer, you can use this to downsize your footprint significantly. So for e-commerce applications, I think you should strive for continuity across all these devices above everything else, and that's why responsive design is a really great strategy for e-commerce. The 2 principles we're working with here are content parity, which is making sure you have access to the same information on all the devices, and functional parity, which means you have access to the same features on all these devices. And neither one of these should be limited for an arbitrary reason like screen size. If a user can filter their search results or write a review or track their order on a laptop, you can bet they're going to want to do the same thing on their phone at some point. Because you can't really generalize that kind of behavior just based on device type. People will use whatever they have at their hand at the time, and that means things like laptops and Wi-Fi on planes or using their phone on the couch. Getting off the ground can be tough, though. And I can't quote you offhand figures of what a responsive site will cost for you, but I can tell you what factors are going to change your costs significantly. If you have to ask this, you're probably already behind. I get the lion's share of inquiries about responsive e-commerce these days, so I've been pooling data about what retailers are seeing, and from everyone that I talk to, it's about 10 to 40% of them are seeing visits from mobile. And when I say mobile, I'm talking about phones and tablets. They're not necessarily always used in a mobile context, but just to generalize, we'll use that word. 20 to 25% is pretty normal, though. For B2B, it's a little bit lower. Certain industries like fashion and entertainment are a little bit higher, but it's not ignorable for anyone because this is cannibalizing the users that are coming from traditional devices like laptops and desktops. And this is a hard thing because a lot of people have this idea that you need to support as many possible devices, just everything under the sun. And it really depends more on your users, what devices they're actually coming from. And not just that, but which users actually buy on those devices. So the way that I like to define support is say we dedicate resources to that platform. It doesn't mean that the other ones aren't important, and it doesn't mean that those unsupported platforms are broken or blocked in any way. They don't necessarily have to look or function exactly the same. And in Skinny Ties, for example, we don't support IE8 or Opera. And we built the site with progressive enhancement, so we don't have to chase down bugs when those things happen. And usually someone from marketing bursts in screaming and says, that's 10% of our users, and we can't take that kind of hit. And you can look that data up in Google Analytics, but having data is not the same thing as having done analysis, to use that word again. So if we look at what we call good browsers, these are widespread. They're a revenue majority for our store. They're an expanding segment because most browsers that are new are getting a lot better and a lot more standardized, and they have a really high growth potential. And this includes all new mobile devices. And then if you look at this other segment that we'll call bad or underused browsers, they're a minority of our revenue, they're a shrinking segment, and they don't have a long-term growth potential. So I'm betting that if you dig into your data, you can make the case that investing today for this 90% group is going to give you a bigger ROI than if you have to keep supporting this old 10% group. And as you get up to be a really, really big retailer, that doesn't really become a good strategy. But most people are not operating at eBay's scale. So if you're a product company who's selling direct to consumers, this can be a really great way to reduce your costs because you don't have to spread your resources over so many platforms at once. Because profit comes from where your users are and where they're going. It's not coming from where they're exiting. So mobile territory is going to be your biggest opportunity for growth in the next 5, 10 years. Don't miss it to keep that old fraction supported. There we go. I guess I have to point it this way. I'm learning that now. Responsive design requires a big shift in the way projects are completed and accepted by clients, though. Internal teams and studios that haven't done a lot of responsive work are probably about a year behind in experience at this point. And if you don't have specialization in doing responsive commerce work, then that probably adds another 6 months. Because the fundamental interactions for e-commerce that we're working through are really being rethought and validated across all these devices. You can't just take the desktop site and cram it into the 6 square inches. The long timelines are a real big barrier to projects, and you can trust me on this because I failed at it miserably with Skinny Ties. We thought it was going to be a 3-month project, and it ended up taking 8 months. And that's because approaching this work with a really high standard requires inventing all those practices as you go. There's not something you can just reach out and grab and take at this point and just have responsive design. When we launched, there were just a handful of sites that were sort of in the same league. And Net Magazine did a profile of the top 25 responsive sites of 2012 and included some really massive brands. And Skinny Ties was on that list for a really good reason, because we spent the majority of our resources refining the front-end user experience. Now, few e-commerce studios are equipped for this type of work today, and that's a big part because the front-end skill set is not something that's e-commerce or Magento specific. You want to have generalists on your staff that are familiar with doing responsive design for other types of projects or other mobile design in general. So we'll do the case study with Skinny Ties. They're a small family-run company, and they operate in a really narrow and competitive niche. They only produce and sell Skinny Ties. And I had worked with them for about 8 months to redesign their business and technology strategies, and responsive design was at the core of that. And in October, I published some overwhelmingly positive data about their launch that covered about the first 2.5 weeks. We didn't announce it at all. There was no social media campaign because we wanted to get purely organic traffic just from people coming out of Google or returning visitors and see how they actually reacted to the site. And since this was sort of the project that kicked responsive commerce into the spotlight, we wanted to come back and say, after that initial really great period that we love to brag about, what happened since then? Is it actually sustainable? Did this make a big difference for their business? And this is a new set of data that compares year-over-year results from the previous and this past holiday season. It's 5.5 months, so there's a lot of data and a huge number of transactions and interactions that we measured from all their users. And what we saw was that transactions are up 58% year over year. And their units sold are up even more, and that means their average order value is up almost 21%. And here's the growth split between, across all devices, Skinny Ties is collecting 90% more revenue than last year. That's a big game changer for their business. Here's the growth split between traditional computers and mobile devices for them. You can see both categories are up. And while mobile may be representing a smaller chunk of revenue today, even though it's growing faster, that's changing really fast. Here's the revenue performance across Android, iPad, and iPhone. There's no device or screen resolution, anything that sells better than an iPhone. These users are 5.3 times more valuable than Android. And that's not a number you can just take and apply to any business, but for us, it makes a lot of sense to dedicate resources to that platform. So that's where we put a lot of our support and QA testing time in. And for the SEO folks, just to prove how much Google loves responsive design, because they've been on record saying that it's a much easier strategy for them to index a responsive site than to have separate MDOT and desktop properties. With almost 80% more targeted organic search traffic, they're capitalizing on that hand over fist. So did responsive design create sustainable growth for them? If we round up all that data, Skinny Ties had a really impressive new bottom line. And apps can't create that much impact in one swoop, and there's pretty much no other marketing initiative that you can go for that will do that either. So it's obvious to me and my clients that responsive design creates this huge growth, and it's not a novelty or a trend that's often associated with buzzwords. For us, it's just good design and it's smart business. And if you'd like to know more about this, I'm also speaking tomorrow at 11:15 a.m. Session's called Mobile First Responsive Design, and it's part 2 to the tech talk that I gave last year. It won't be a rehash of any content. This is all new information. So I hope you join me. And if you're a business person, some of you guys, don't feel afraid because there's a lot of stuff in there for you too. Thanks.